Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. We have got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. It's the Sweet 16 episode. We have two teams in the Sweet 16. We have the Boilermakers and the Fighting Illini, and we have brought two of them together today. They were beefing toward the end of the season, but we have brought them together today to talk about their teams. From Purdue, we have Frank from the Boiler Express podcast. Frank, how you doing tonight?
Doing well, JR. Happy to talk about basketball and be united for the first time in a while with some fellow Big Ten basketball fans. So excited to be here.
Yes, we will be united, and of course cheering on our other teams. Well, at least I will. I don't know how you guys will be cheering on each other, but we also have Sonny from the Illini cast to be with us tonight. Sonny, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I think this is the second time I've been on the show with Frank. And from what I remember, the first show, we absolutely killed it, which is why I'm sure you have us coming back, JR. So looking forward to this version.
Oh, yeah. Got to bring the Dream Team back for the Sweet 16 episode. So, yeah, that's what we got to do. Dylan, also somebody who works with Frank over at Boiler Express. He says, "Go, Frank, big brain, son of a gun." So, Dylan is expecting a lot from you tonight, Frank.
No pressure at all.
No pressure. All right, let's just go ahead and get into it and get right away. Our very first game we're going to break down. I figured higher seeded team, we have to break them down first, right? No offense, Sonny, but that's just kind of how it goes. Purdue takes on Gonzaga. These two teams did previously meet. I think, what was it, third or fourth game? I think it was the fourth game of the
Gonzaga's third. I think it was Purdue's fourth game.
Okay, all right. Yep. So Purdue's fourth game of the season, and Purdue won 73-63. I was making jokes that like Purdue has the perfect path to the national championship, and actually the entire rest of the tournament if they face Gonzaga and then Tennessee and then Marquette and then Illinois. It's like we'll just play all the teams that we've already played this season. But yeah, definitely a good sign for Purdue there. However, I would say that I think this Gonzaga team is a little bit different than who they were at the beginning of the season. They're doing things a little bit differently. I think Mark Few has a little bit better of a handle on this team, is working with them differently. But Frank, I know that you have probably thought about this game every which way possible. So what are your thoughts going into this one?
Yeah, I have thought about this game quite a bit. You are right about that. And I think that it's hard to take a lot away from the first matchup between the two teams because it was a pretty big anomaly in a lot of facets, really. Gonzaga went 6 for 32 from three. Was actually Purdue's worst shooting night of the season. They were only 24%. Purdue didn't rebound the ball very well. Both teams turned the ball over quite a bit. It was really an anomaly on both sides. So I don't know how much to take away from this game, in terms of thinking about the first matchup. But Gonzaga, I think the biggest advantage that Purdue has in this game is Purdue's depth because Gonzaga is really kind of limited now to a 7-man rotation. And I think that, Purdue rotating fewer guys, in the NCAA tournament, but as many as 10 we've seen throughout the season could be where Purdue has a big advantage in this game. But ultimately, I'm terrified. I respect the heck out of Mark Few. I respect the heck out of Gonzaga. Ken Pom predicts a 4-point win, and I can see that going 4 points Purdue, 4 points Gonzaga, but ultimately I do expect it to be a close game, and I expect it to be a grinder. And again, I think both teams are different, honestly, than what we saw back in November. But I'm super excited and nervous somehow at the same time. But I think it's going to be a close game, and I'm pulling for a Boilermaker win.
Now, Frank, let me ask you this before we go to Sonny. Both teams, as I've watched them recently, have seemed to slow their pace down even more than usual. Purdue, obviously, is not the fastest team in the nation. However, they have slowed down more. And Gonzaga, most of the year, they seem to be pretty quick. Not the quickest, but pretty quick. And they've just slowed down completely. And I don't know if that's because of depth or what Mark Few is thinking there. However, do you think that there's a possibility that Purdue might try to get out and run a little bit more in this one and try to speed up the pace of a Gonzaga team that doesn't have the depth that Purdue has? Or what do you think will happen in those terms?
Yeah, I'll kind of answer that with a Matt Painter quote. He said Purdue doesn't get enough credit for playing in transition, and Gonzaga doesn't get enough credit for playing in the half court. And I think you're right. I think throughout the season they look to get out and transition a little bit more. Purdue, I think, typically looks that way. In the fast break, they try to look to score if it's there, but if it's not, they slow it down. And Purdue doesn't necessarily have a ton of personnel who are built to do that. They, Lance Jones is Miles Golden, Cam Heide can, but not everybody can. But I think that, Mark Few is a very opportunistic coach. And that if he sees the opportunities there, they're definitely going to look to take it. But I think, part of it is that, when you're playing in the tournament, you're playing in conference tournaments that teams are going to bring their best, and teams have scattered you quite a bit. I just think that both teams are going to look to be as opportunistic as they can. But I hope they don't. I hope Purdue can keep them in front of them and make it a half-court game, because defensively, I feel like Purdue's been playing pretty well the last 3 or 4 games. So I like Purdue's chances more in the half-court than I do in transition.
Yeah, no, Purdue's been fantastic in the last few games, and Gonzaga has as well. I look it up, Barton Torvik's numbers. Purdue has been, ever since the NCAA tournament started, Purdue has been the 5th best team in the tournament, and Gonzaga has been 6th. So both of these teams are playing really well right now. It's hard to argue that either one has much of an advantage on the other one. I mean, even this season, Purdue has scored 83.9 points per game, and Gonzaga has scored exactly the same at 83.9 points per game. So very interesting matchup. I don't think it'll be like Utah State or Grambling State at all. And I am nervous here for the Boilermakers, but as always, I look at Zach Edey and say, you have Zach Edey. When you have the best player on the court, there's less to be nervous about in that situation. But Sonny, going to you in this one. Obviously, you've watched more Illini basketball, but you do watch Purdue as well. The best team in the Big Ten, and they won the Big Ten this year. And I don't know how much you've watched Gonzaga. However, what are your thoughts going into this game?
I try to keep up with all the other teams that are kind of going on in the tournament. I've called Purdue winning the national championship about a month and a half ago, and I think this kind of fits in with the storyline. I've said Matt Painter is a top 3 coach in the country since the season started. I think he's an amazing coach. Today, on Friday night, he just happens to go up against a coach who might be top 2, if not top 1. So it's a matchup I do have Purdue winning pretty handedly, but if there's one guy who I think can kind of, maybe confuse Matt Painter a little bit or require Matt Painter to make adjustments mid-game, it's Mark Few. Mark Few, he's got a reputation where he's kind of like, if he finds something that's working, he's going to keep doing it until you figure it out. And so all of a sudden, if Gonzaga gets off to a pretty hot start, the pressure is going to be on Matt Painter to try to make an adjustment and try to counteract that. Now, granted, we know Zach Edey is the cheat code. He's going to get his 27 and 14 and whatever it may be. But if, for whatever reason, the Gonzaga shots are falling and the Purdue shooters' shots aren't, then the game could get pretty close. But again, I think Purdue wins pretty handedly on Friday night.
Now, one piece of this that I am really interested in, Sonny, is that Gonzaga has one of the lowest free throw rates in the nation. I mean, over the last 5 games, it's 26%, according to CBB Analytics. That is super, super low. Purdue, on the season, their free throw rate is 42.4%. I mean, we're talking like a 16-point, math in my head, 16-point difference there between the two teams. I mean, I when I look at these teams and I say Zach Edey doesn't foul much, he doesn't foul hardly at all. And I don't think that Gonzaga has anybody down low that's going to be able to give him consistent issues to where Gonzaga is not going to be fouling, and they're going to be, preventing that from happening with Purdue. And so in this situation, I don't know if Gonzaga is going to be able to overcome Purdue shooting as many free throws as they probably are going to be able to shoot. I mean, I would think at least 20 in this game, and Gonzaga could shoot as few as 10 or 12, probably more than that, but that's probably as few as they could shoot in this one. So, I mean, I know we love to talk about the refs and yada, 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 whatever, and I'm sure that'll come up in this game like it does with every Purdue game, and, I just kind of leave that alone nowadays because it's not even relevant conversation in my mind. But are you concerned about the free throw rate of these two teams, Sonny, at all?
I mean, it's a concern for sure because, again, as you kind of reference Edey, the only way to really, in my opinion, beat a Purdue team is to try to bring Edey away from the paint at least as often as you can. And if Edey's not down low, then he's not fouling. And so that means that Edey's going to be playing 33, 35, 37 minutes. And if Edey's playing 37 minutes, he's going to post up monster numbers. And so, I mean, again, the foul discrepancy, it happens, but it's kind of been the story of the season. As Purdue fans will tell you, that their offense is kind of almost designed that way, similar to what Illinois does with Terrence Shannon. It's the idea is to catch the defense off guard in transition and rack up fouls, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in our next preview. So it's in Purdue's strategy to get those fouls on Gonzaga, and I can see that being the narrative, but not being the reason that one team wins or loses.
Yeah, for sure. Frank, going to you with this one. Definitely in this game, Gonzaga does not. They don't turn the ball over hardly at all. And one of Purdue's weaknesses this year, I don't know if you want to call it a weakness or not, but it's something that they've been deficient in. And I think they're okay with being deficient in it because they don't seem to require it as much as other teams do. But they don't get a ton of steals against the other team. And so when you combine a low steal rate for Purdue and then a very low turnover rate for Gonzaga, you could see a situation very quickly where Gonzaga has maybe 3 turnovers in this game, and that's also a point for them in this one where you're looking at it and saying, well, if Gonzaga just doesn't turn the ball over, they're going to maximize their opportunities, and Purdue could be in trouble if they do start turning the ball over, which seems to be the way that you kind of beat Purdue in my mind. Whether it's Edey or Smith or somebody like that, you get them to start turning the ball over because that's basically your only chance to not get dunked on by Zach Edey. But Frank, in terms of the low steal rate for Purdue and the low turnover rate for Gonzaga, does that worry you at all?
It really doesn't. And the reason why, so Purdue's never been, a team that's going to turn you over quite a bit. They're ranked 340th in turnover forcing. So the percentage of opponent possessions that results in a turnover. So not very high. And we've seen Purdue play these types of games before where, they still win the game, but the opponent, it only turns it over 4 or 5 times. And, but I think you hit the nail on the head in that, if the script were to flip, for example, if Purdue starts to turn the ball over, that's where things can get really dangerous. So as long as Purdue can keep their turnover percentage, sub 15, I feel really good. And to touch on the free throw disparity or the foul disparity for a second, in this first game, and again, I'm not taking a ton away from that because both teams are much different now. Gonzaga did guard Zach Edey one-on-one, or they tried to, at least for the majority of the first half. I'll be really curious to see how they look to do that, especially with the the limited personnel they have on that kind of 7-man rotation. So that'll definitely be something to watch as well. I'm not trying not to sound like too much of a homer, but not a ton of people have had success guarding Zach Edey one-on-one, especially this season and last season. So that's also going to be a big story, and I think that'll kind of lend itself to the free throw story that goes along with this game. But really, no, I'm not concerned about the steal disparity and turnover disparity there. If if Purdue can be opportunistic and look to steal, Purdue's not very aggressive on defense. They play a little bit conservatively. They don't get aggressive. They don't contest a ton of shots too intensely. So I'm not concerned about it, just because it's nothing new is the ultimate takeaway there.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Sonny, before we get out of here with this game, let's go ahead and go to you with your prediction for the game. Give me who you think ultimately will win this game. And you mentioned a score and the scoring discrepancy. So what is your score prediction for this game as well?
I think there's only one team that doesn't have to play a perfect game to beat Purdue this year, and Gonzaga's not that team. I'm going to say it's going to actually be a higher scoring game. I'm going to say 91-77 Purdue.
Wow. Frank, your prediction for who will win and your score prediction.
Yeah, this morning I ran 10,000 simulations of this game. Purdue won 78% of them. The most common score was 82-76 Purdue. So I'm going to go with that.
It's pretty spot on with KenPom with the 81-77 there. So, I went into this thinking I'll pick Purdue. Do I want to pick Gonzaga just to be different? No, because I can't. I'm kind of with you, Sonny, to where it's like Gonzaga has to play a perfect game in order to win this one. I can see a way that Gonzaga wins, but it's much more difficult for them to win in my mind. And if there is a team that can put together a perfect game in the NCAA tournament, it's somebody with with one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. So I do think that Purdue will win this one because I don't think Matt Painter is a slouch, and I think that Matt Painter is at the very least one of the top 5 coaches in college basketball, if not top 3, before like mentioned before. But I will go ahead and say that I actually contend it'll be a little bit of a lower scoring game with the pace being low in this one. I'm gonna go with 75-69 in this one. I just think both of these teams are going to be content with slowing it down, and you'll see some free throws and things like that. Maybe one of them will struggle with it, but at the end of the day, I think it'll slow down and we'll get a lower scoring game. So, all right, let's move on to the next game here. Sonny, this is yours. Illinois and Iowa State. The 3 seed Illinois versus the number 2 seed Iowa State. Iowa State, of course, was hot going into the tournament, having that blowout win against Houston. They've done well in the tournament so far, but I wouldn't say they're one of the hotter teams. They're not one of the sexiest teams to pick just because defense isn't a brand of basketball that everybody enjoys watching. However, Illinois is definitely one of the sexiest teams right now because of Terrence Shannon Jr.'s ability to score, Coleman Hawkins' versatility to do what he does, and Marcus Domask's triple-double that he had in the very first game of the tournament. So a lot of hype for Illinois right now, but I've also heard a lot of people say that Iowa State's not going to give up what other teams have been giving up to Illinois. So, Sonny, what are your thoughts going into this game?
I think this is the best game of the Sweet 16 slate. I think it genuinely could come down to the final possession. We've all heard the cliche, the number 1 offense against the number 1 defense. We know what's going to happen with that, but I also think it's 2 of the better coaches in the country whose teams have really kind of bought into what their coach is saying. It's going to be tough. I think right now Illinois is kind of, as you kind of worded it, like a sexy pick, a trendy pick, just because of our style of play. But I'm kind of worried that despite a lot of the media picking Illinois to win, a lot of the fanfare on Twitter and whatnot, you see, Illinois as the prediction. Like Vegas still has Iowa State as a favorite, and Vegas knows what they're doing for the most part. So I actually, we'll get to it a little later. I'm not nearly as confident as I was, of course, naturally, after the first 2 games that we had. Not that I'm going to respond to, naysayers who say, Illinois got an easy first 2 games. That's fine. It's just turning the luck around. We have one of the more unfortunate luck when it comes to bracket seeding, at least in our most recent past. But I think it's going to be a great game. Iowa State is built to kind of minimize what Marcus Domask does with his booty ball. So it's going to be interesting for us to see if Terrence Shannon can not only be doing what Terrence Shannon does, but also on top of that, whether a Coleman Hawkins or a Quincy Guerrier, these guys are going to be able to make the open 3-pointers that they're going to get when the double teams, the triple teams comes towards Domask.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in my mind, Domask is the key in this game. I've heard some people say it's TSJ, some people say it's Coleman Hawkins and his versatility. To me, this is the game where the point guard stuff comes back to Illinois. Brad Underwood said at the beginning of the season that he's not concerned about not having a point guard on the team. And honestly, I wouldn't be too concerned about it either when you have Marcus Domask getting triple doubles. But at the end of the day, Marcus Domask is going to be tested here with his point guard play. Is he going to be able to handle the ball well enough to keep it away from Iowa State? And is he going to be able to run sets for Illinois and get the scores in their position to score as they need to do? So, Marcus Domask, I think he's up to it. He's been playing at this amazing level that nobody else in the country, not nobody else, very few players in the country are able to play at, and then Terrence Shannon Jr. as well, playing at such a high level. So in my mind, Illinois, it kind of depends on how they do. Iowa State is going to play their game. They're going to play tough-nosed defense. But if Illinois can play defense back in the entire game, not just for half of the game like we saw in part of the Big Ten tournament, but if they play it the entire game and they are able to keep the ball away from Iowa State and handle it well, then I could see this being a game where Illinois wins. but I could also see it be a little difficult for Illinois to come in and win this one as well. But Frank, your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I mean, kind of to echo what Sonny said there, it's the unstoppable force against the immovable object, right? Like, what's going to falter? And if I can just pluck myself out of this Purdue fan base for a second, pretend that I'm not a Purdue fan, this too would be the most exciting game of the Sweet 16, in my opinion, just for that reason. But I think some of the things that exist in the Illini's favor, it's been said in the comments already. Iowa State's defense is, largely centered around generating turnovers. So they turn their opponents over more than 1 out of 4 possessions. So it's just over 25% of the time. But Illinois is actually, one of the best teams in the country at not turning the ball over. And when you look at the 5 worst performances with respect to turning your opponent over for Iowa State, 4 of those 5 were losses for them. So I think that, that's part of the recipe is just to take care of the ball, because they are good at turning those turnovers into quick offense. And that's something Illinois is really good at doing, but as well. But I think that, for the Illini to not let the score get away from them, taking care of the ball is going to be step number 1. And JR, you hit on it as well. That Domask is key. If he can start to play his booty ball and draw those double teams and draw those post traps and then kick it out, and Illinois can stay disciplined on the perimeter, I think that's going to be key. And so really there are 2 main questions here. It's can Illinois' defense step up if the shots aren't falling, and vice versa for Ohio State? Can they generate offense if their defense isn't carrying them? This is a game that, I can really see going either way, but Sonny, I agree with you completely in that it's probably going to come down to the final possession. And I mean, both teams are hot. Both teams won their conference championships. Both teams had pretty convincing outings so far in the NCAA tournament. I mean, Iowa State blew out Houston, to win their conference championship. I'm really excited for this game. Pulling for an Illini win, the Big Ten definitely needs it. Yeah, I'm so pumped. I do think it's going to be a very close game and a very fun game to watch. Wish it wasn't so late.
Right. We're all going to be falling asleep, and Terrence
yeah.
Jr. is going to wake us up when he gets in transition. So. All right, Sonny, you tell me if these numbers you think should be concerning for Iowa State. 6'4" point guard, 6'1" shooting guard, 6'8" small forward, 6'7" power forward, 6'10" center. Going up against the smallest player on Illinois' team is the 6'6" guard, Ty Rogers. I guess 6'6" Marcus Domask as well. But, I mean, that's something that I'm looking at that nobody seems to be mentioning when it's coming to this game. And maybe I'm just stupid and I'm the only person thinking about it. But the length of Illinois and their athleticism as well. Don't get me wrong, Iowa State's a very athletic team too. They have good athletic players on defense, and you need to be athletic on defense. But I do wonder how much of this Illinois team is going to just overpower Iowa State with their length and with their athleticism, getting into transition, because at the end of the day, I don't think Iowa State is going to be able to stop Illinois in transition every single time. They're obviously a good transition defense in addition to a good half-court defense. However, I just look at this Illinois team and say this is a complete mismatch in terms of length and size. What are your thoughts on that, Sonny?
I mean, I think for the most part, you are correct. I think Iowa State doesn't get as much love as that team should. At least over the last 3 weeks, they're one of the best teams in the country, not just offensively or defensively. They've just been a really good basketball team. But Illinois is kind of built to beat that Iowa State defense in the sense that, where you kind of alluded to it, we don't have a natural point guard, but that means we don't have a 6'1", 6'2" tiny guy dribbling around the court. What we do have is 5 guys, 6'6" and higher, passing the ball around. All 5 guys on the floor in 2 of our lineups can shoot the 3 and can drive to the hoop. And that kind of counteracts what a trapping and double teaming, triple teaming defense can kind of do. So I think you're right. Again, we do have a size advantage on most teams in the country. And I think that should the Illini come out victorious Thursday night, we're going to talk about that being kind of one of the storylines of it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the only teams you don't have a side advantage against is Zach Edey at Purdue, but I don't think anybody has a size advantage against that.
And definitely we're going to.
Yeah, exactly. So, Frank, I do want to talk to you about one player. You're always the man that brings the stats here, and I feel like this guy has some kind of stat a brewing, and so I don't mean to put you on the spot with him, but I do want to ask you about him because I think he has been one of, if not my favorite players to watch in the tournament so far, and I just don't think he's getting enough credit nationally. I think he's getting credit from Big Ten fans and he's getting credit from Illinois fans, but I don't think he's getting enough credit nationally. Dane Danger. Is it time to talk about the danger zone yet? Because we talked about the boo zone, but the boo zone is gone. Is it time to talk about the danger zone yet? Because this guy has been key for Illinois in their games, and he's been playing better defense as well, helping this team to be able to do what they're doing. And Frank, I'm curious on your thoughts about Dane in this game.
Yeah, I don't know who Iowa State will have really to match up with Danger. I think he's still coming off the bench. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think him coming off the bench, some players are just great at feasting on second units, right? I think you can't really tell. I'm wearing a Mason Gillis jersey. I think that Mason Gillis is a great example of that, and someone that could start, but they just do so well against that second unit. If I'm looking at the numbers here, right, he was perfect he hasn't missed a shot in the tournament, which is crazy. And I think that him playing. It's hard for me to say his best basketball, but really good basketball right now is just going to help the Illini that much more. And I think that, I really, like you said, I really don't know who's going to kind of combat that. And Sonny, I want to go back to a point that you made a minute ago. One thing that has always been fascinating to me about Illinois this season is that they have a pretty low assist percentage. They're 292nd in assist percentage this season. Yet they're now the number one offense. I think that could potentially be something that's advantageous for them because there's not necessarily one guy you have to look to shut down from a distribution standpoint. If you think about, most teams, they have one kind of distribution hub and this that usually exists as a prominent point guard, but you have five guys who are just passing the ball around kind of at will. And that just may be a different style of offense that, Iowa State maybe just hasn't seen before. And I mean, Illinois does play kind of a unique style of offense in that you have five guys who can kind of beat you off the dribble and take you one-on-one, score kind of individually in different ways. So I'm the more I talk about this game, the more I think about it, the more excited I get. But yeah, I think, the emergence of Dane Danger lately is going to just add that extra punch they need. And also, Gibbs Lawhorn as well has been playing really well in the tournament. Be excited to see what he can add. This entire Illini team is just clicking on all cylinders, and they're definitely going to give this Iowa State team a run for their money.
Yes, they are, and this is going to be Iowa State's greatest defensive test of the season, and they're going to have to rely on it. So, Sonny, prediction, do you have a winner, and do you have a score prediction for this game?
I mean, I can see this game going either way. I genuinely believe that. Ultimately, on my preview this morning, I had Iowa State something like 77, Illinois 72. I just think there's a better chance that I think our best chance of winning is just getting out early. Damascus hitting his shots, us hitting our 3-pointers and getting some room to kind of fall back a little bit should we need to. But if Iowa keeps it close the entire game, their defense is just really, really tough. All it takes is a couple misses on our end to make a mistake. So again, maybe I'm just trying to jinx myself, but I have Iowa State winning Thursday night.
Wow. Frank, who do you have winning?
Yeah, I'm just going to fall back on I ran 10,000 simulations again this morning. And it was a truly 50-50. I mean, it was like 49.8 to like 50.2 in favor of Iowa State. Again, that's why you play the game though. So Sonny, I'm going to take Illinois by 3. I'm going to take Illinois 72, Iowa State 69. I think it's a slower paced game. Iowa State's kind of a slower paced team. Illinois is a fast paced team. Those things will kind of cancel each other out. So we'll kind of have a middle of the road score. And that's what I'm going to predict. I want to see the Big Ten excel in the tournament. So that's what I'm going to hope for here.
I see the Illini fans in this chat are commenting the same way that they did on my show this morning. If you take a look at those comments, there's a lot of people not very happy with me, but I try to be as objective as possible when it comes to talking, whether it's Purdue as a team or the Illini. Sometimes I'm not as high as the fan base gets, but I also don't get as low as the fan base gets during the season.
Sonny, let me ask you a question before I give my prediction. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is the name of this show?
The name of the show is the Big Ten Huddle.
Yes. So we're gonna pick the Big Ten to win this one.
Hey, that'd be good for our bracket.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say you were saying you weren't gonna pick them, and I was like, well, we picked them to go to the national championship against Purdue with Brant. So no, I'm gonna pick Illinois in this one, and solely because I feel like Illinois is going to reach 80 points in this game. And even though Illinois' defense has been struggling at times, essentially in the first half, for the last 3 or 4. 5 games, however many it's been, back to Ohio State. Even though they have been struggling in the first half with their defense, I think Brad Underwood gets these guys together and he gets them to actually play defense throughout the entire game. I can see a situation where Illinois goes on a scoring drought for maybe 5-6 minutes at the most, but I don't see Iowa State going on a 12-0 run in that time. Iowa State is just not one of those teams where they're going to explode. Ohio State last night, I don't mean to make this about Ohio State, but Ohio State last night exploded for like a 17-0 run in like 4 minutes. Iowa State, they dream of situations like that. It's never going to happen. Even against a team like Illinois, who has struggled with their defense, it's never going to happen. So in my mind, even though, yes, Iowa State could bring Illinois into a 5-6 minute run where they don't score, Iowa State maybe scores 8 points in that run. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to put them in such a hole that it's detrimental. I think Illinois will be in it through the entire game, and I think Illinois' athleticism and their size will win out in this one. I think Illinois wins this one 81-72.
I hope you two are right.
I also hope I'm right. All right, guys, let's do a commercial really fast, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some NBA and transfer portal stuff. So here's a commercial. Looking to rep your alma mater or your favorite team in style? Look no further than Home Field. Home Field, based in Indianapolis, is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel. With a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design, Home Field brings you officially licensed gear that is cozy as it is stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create apparel that is truly one of a kind. Head on over to homefieldapparel.com. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. If you're a serious college basketball fan, you need CBB Analytics. CBB Analytics isn't just another stat site. It's the ultimate destination for in-depth basketball analysis. Used by fans and coaches alike, CBB Analytics delivers stats that you won't find anywhere else. It has comprehensive stats for men's and women's basketball across Division 1 through 3, dating all the way back to 2018. From shooting percentages to game recaps, CBB Analytics has it all. Head on over to cbbanalytics.com. With their user-friendly interface and extensive selection, you'll have all the stats you need right at your fingertips. Don't miss out. Try CBB Analytics for free or pay for a pro tier for your basketball knowledge to grow to the next level. CBB Analytics, where every stat tells a story and every game is a masterpiece. All right, very good. We are going to move on now to, I guess I could have changed this while it was going on. Big Ten teams and players in the transfer portal. We've had a busy day today with some transfer portal players. C.J. Wilcher from Nebraska entered the portal. Patrick McCaffrey entered the portal. That was a big one that not many people were expecting. We can go off on is Fran done at Iowa tangent if we want to. But at the end of the day, this is college basketball now. Anybody can go into the transfer portal. Connor Essegian from Wisconsin even entered the transfer portal. What was that? 2 days ago on Monday. So, just absolutely crazy. Rutgers has like half their team in the portal right now. So just so many things going on. But Sonny, we'll start with you. In your mind, and we're going to talk about teams struggling more than teams excelling because there's not really that many teams bringing in people. If anybody was excelling, it's probably Maryland. They're brought in 2 transfers right now that are both very good. So I don't know if there's really a discussion there. But Sonny, in your mind, who are some teams that are struggling the most in the transfer portal so far in the Big Ten?
Well, I think this transfer portal is very key to watch for a lot of teams not named Purdue and Illinois. We know Purdue builds up their talent. They recruit really well. They'll get 1 or 2 guys in the portal who are going to complement the guys already on the team. We know that's what Matt Painter does. We know Brad, he's probably already been talking to people. We have a lot of scholarships to give next year, but we have, a reputation of being able to be a good landing spot for transfers. So those 2 teams I'm not too worried about, but it's the Michigan States. Obviously Tom Izzo's had a target on his back for a while now for his reluctance to kind of jump into the portal. Indiana, they seem to have, I think like 3 or 4 scholarship players playing on next year's team right now. They're going to have to rebuild essentially through the transfer portal, and that's a team that already Mike Woodson is on the hot seat. Then you have Iowa, another team that's done pretty well in the Big Ten the last few years. I thought they had a pretty decent season for such a young team, but one of their best players, Tony Perkins, goes in the transfer portal. The coach's son goes in the transfer portal. So there's a lot of teams that I'm really interested in seeing like who kind of steps up in the next tier down from the Purdue and Illinois in the conference to see who kind of, Nebraska, I think I saw that they only have like 5 scholarship players left for next year too. The transfer portal is going to be very key to what the Big Ten is going to look like in 2024, 2025. And so, it's going to be interesting to see which coach really attacks the portal aggressively. We've kind of seen it with Willard, and he's done a fantastic job with the 2 guys he's brought in. But, Maryland, they're a nice team, but it's the other more franchised programs that I'm thinking of that I'm really more interested in watching to see what they do.
Yeah, for sure. And I know with Purdue, they're Frank, 1 over their scholarship limit right now, I think it is.
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah. I heard that from every Purdue fan when I suggested that they might get a point guard out of the portal, and was quickly told by every Purdue fan there was in the world. So, which I appreciate. Thank you for letting me know, and all I talk about. But yeah, no, I think you definitely look at like teams like Purdue, and you say this team's probably gonna lose somebody to the portal out of necessity. They probably won't bring anybody in, maybe 1 or 2 players at the most. But then you look at teams like Maryland, where they have to bring in a bunch of players, and Indiana as well. I know Indiana's bringing back Trey Galloway. Malik Renew has not entered the portal, so that's good news for them. Gabe Cupps, I think Renew said he's coming back too. I think the biggest win of the day was Julian Reese coming back to Maryland. For him to be able to play in the front court, possibly alongside Derek Queen, or him and Derek Queen with each other. I don't know exactly how that's going to work, but I do think Derek Queen will probably get some time there. But Frank, looking at these teams in the portal so far and what they've lost or maybe what they have not gained yet, who do you think has been maybe a loser in the portal and been struggling the most right now?
Yeah, well, I'll start with a surprise. I just learned about 3 minutes ago that CJ Wilcher has entered the portal. I was not aware of that until you said that, JR. Yeah, okay. So that was that one's he's been really good this season. That's really interesting. But in terms of the teams that have been hit really hard, obviously Rutgers, they losing Big Cliff, losing Mawat Mag, and losing Derek Simpson are 3 huge losses to them. Now they have a great recruiting class coming in next season as well. But I feel like we're at this point in the sport where freshmen are having the least impact that I can ever remember. Honestly, like you don't see freshmen come in and be major contributors, and unless you're, Christie, from Minnesota. Or like there are a few exceptions, but like for the most part, your guys aren't making huge impacts until they're sophomores, juniors these days. But ultimately, if I had to pick a team that's been hit the hardest, it's hard to argue against Rutgers. Michigan's obviously been with Doug McDaniel and George Washington and Terrace Reed, but I'm be really curious to see how the new coaching staff can possibly retain some of those guys. I don't know, what all is going on there. And there's been some rumblings of Dusty May bringing some guys with him. But if there's a possibility they can keep a couple of those guys, that's still up in the air. So I'm not gonna put that one out as the biggest one. But I really think for me it's got to be Iowa, and really it's just the foreshadowing. It's like, what, with McCaffrey in the portal, what does that mean? Does it mean he just doesn't want to play for his dad and there's nothing more to look into there? I don't know. I mean, with Tony Perkins being like their highest usage player this season, it's really surprising to see him hop in the portal. But to me, it's just kind of indicative of some turmoil perhaps going on at Iowa right now. And for that reason, I think that's probably the most significant transfer portal situation in my opinion right now.
I agree. Yeah, I wasn't planning on saying them when I was thinking about this morning. I was planning to go maybe more the Rutgers route or possibly the Indiana route, but saying Indiana could save themselves by bringing some players in. I don't think they've lost anybody too influential. CJ Gunn, I think, is obviously somebody you would have liked to hold on to. He seemed like he was kind of getting to his game a little bit more toward the end of the year. However, some of that was also just chucking up shots at the end of the game when, they were getting blown out a couple times. But at the end of the day, yeah, Iowa, I mean, anytime you lose somebody like Tony Perkins, who played over 1,000 minutes this season, that's obviously huge. Sonny, let's talk about players for a second, and this one won't take as long, but just give me one player that really, really surprised you. They went into the portal. Obviously, we were expecting guys like Doug McDaniel to go in, maybe somebody, or, Kanye Clary, he was away from the team, so we expected him to go in, but there were other guys, Patrick McCaffrey, Connor Esigian, Cliff Amorie, Tony Perkins. I mean, tons of guys like that are surprising. Who were you the most surprised by going into the portal?
For me, it was Chucky Hepburn. I think he was kind of the soul of Wisconsin basketball. And the fact that he entered the transfer portal kind of tells me that, Wisconsin, obviously we know Storr is going to test the NBA, but we've all heard whispers on what his true intentions are beyond if he doesn't get the grade that he wants. They don't have a lot of talent coming back next year either. And, we're talking about bad vibes with a couple of teams that we've been talking about. I think Wisconsin's floor could be very, very low next year. And having Chucky there could at least be kind of a veteran presence to limit that floor. But if he's trying to get out, I'd be really, really worried if I was a Badgers fan.
Do you mean Connor Esigian?
No, it wasn't Chucky Hepburn.
I don't think Chucky Hepburn. That's news to me if he did.
That's also news to me, but I just learned about CJ Wilshire as well. So
hold on, unless I'm reading insider saying.
Did you get a Twitter post get you again?
Oh no, we talked about this before. Let me check.
Yeah, I'm not aware if Chucky Hepburn went into the portal. I knew he had a year of eligibility left, but check on that for a second, and then let's go to Frank and get his, and then we'll come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was really surprised at Connor Esigian. Then I thought about it more. I'm like, well, actually, he was a high minutes guy and a high production guy last season, and he's kind of an exception to the freshman rule that I just talked about. But really, when I sat and thought about this, I'm gonna have to go with Cliff Amorie. He just embodies Rutgers basketball. I can't think of a better player who just epitomizes what Rutgers stands for. He's tough. He plays hard. He's gritty. I mean, and that's a team that is gonna bring it. They're gonna play physical. That's what Steve Peichel's built there. And I know he's loved by the fans. And I personally hate playing against him from a Purdue standpoint. He always seems to play Purdue tough and be a major contributor when that game happens. So. That was a really big surprise for me, and he's getting a lot of attention from some really big schools. One of which I've heard is Illinois. Sonny, I'm sure you're aware of that. That was the one that was the most surprising to me, because just from that kind of embodiment standpoint, that he is Rutgers basketball, as far as I'm concerned. So that was a really surprising one for me.
Okay.
Well, the thing that I was
just to clarify, when I was doing research for tonight's topics, I tend to go on all the Big Ten teams' message boards and kind of see what their insiders were saying. And two different teams in the Big Ten both said that conversations were happening with Chucky Hepburn. And so that's why I guess I just assumed he was already formally in the portal. But right now,
But it could happen. Okay.
80% of this stuff is being talked about in the back rooms anyway. So
You heard it here first, right?
Yeah, exactly. Broken by Sonny Verma. Let's make that official.
Insider Sonny. He reads the message board. So
yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, it's
okay.
Yeah, it is what it is. Again, I take that.
No, I think that is crazy. If Chucky Hepburn enters the portal, that would absolutely be my number one most surprising. And the thing I was going to say, Frank, about Cliff Moria is that not only was I surprised that he entered the portal, but I heard that he kind of knew where his destination was, and so I'm surprised that he Sonny Schefter. All right, Dylan. But I'm surprised that he's not somewhere right now. Somebody like Peyton Sparks, he went to the portal, and literally like the next day later, he's at Ball State. Noah Batchelor, or however you say his last name, he went to Buffalo like right away. I thought it'd be a situation like that with Cliff Moria, where it's like he knows where he's going, he's going to get in the portal and go. But it sounds like he has a lot more people, like once he went in the portal, they're like, oh, hold on, like, think about this for a minute. You could go to a contender. You could go to somebody like in Illinois that would be very beneficial for you and possibly contend for a national championship next year. And so, that is surprising to me. I think I was probably the most shocked by Patrick McCaffrey, though, just because of the father-son connection. And I'm thinking, what in the world, like, does this mean Fran is done? And if Fran is done, he needs to get out as quickly as possible because Iowa needs to find the next head coach. And they're all dropping like flies around him. So, that's the big part there. But all right, let's go on to our next one. Another player leaving. Kel'el Ware declares for the NBA draft. Guys, you guys tell me. I feel like this situation where Kel'el is basically done. He's pretty much a lock for the NBA draft. I couldn't see him coming back. He had rumblings before last year after Oregon, but he kind of needed a year to really solidify himself as an NBA draft pick. Frank, do you get the same kind of vibe from me that he is gone to the NBA, most likely not coming back?
Yeah, I do. I love looking at mock drafts and draft boards and things like that, and they are all over the place this year. I mean, they are like, I know they say it's a weak draft and whatnot, but they are just, no one can seem to agree. But one thing I have noticed as I've watched throughout the season is he's kind of fallen. He was like a top 5 guy before, for the good part of the first half of the season, and then I just kind of started seeing him fall, to mid first round, late first round, but I haven't seen him, anything outside of the first round. And I think anytime you have basically a guaranteed first round, and then you go. That's just kind of an unwritten rule. So yeah, I do think that he does leave, and I think it's a big blow to Indiana. Unfortunately, there's a lot of untapped potential there. I mean, he's already a great player, but his ceiling is very high, and obviously the NBA still likes to draft on potential. We're seeing that shift a little bit, that they are looking for some media contributors, guys like Jaime Jaquez, for example, where they come in, ready to go. But I think he's gone, and I think that it's a major blow to Indiana, because they're a different team when he's in the game, mostly defensively, but he can stretch the floor. He can cause some problems for opposing big men. But yeah, he's going to be missed there for sure, assuming I am right and he does leave.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's gone. I think, he had during the season possible top 10 potential to be drafted there. And yes, he has slid, but he slid down to like 21, 22 is kind of where I've seen him. I think the lowest I saw him was 24. So in my opinion, I think he's gone. Sonny, do you agree or do you kind of differ?
Yeah, again, and now that we've confirmed I'm a message board watcher, the 24/7 guys, Rab Johns, I think that's their Indiana guy, has said it's a 100%. He's not even entertaining the thought of coming back. So I think he's gone, and I think honestly that could be a good thing for Indiana. Obviously he played with Oregon his first year and he was kind of disappointing, but the fact that he developed as well as he did for the Hoosiers, I think can be something that Mike Woodson kind of sells to other potential, incoming transferees. And so especially, if he goes on to be drafted a little higher than was expected and has a decent NBA career, I think in the long run, it could work out for, Indiana as a team.
Yeah. I mean, and when I look at this, I think, this is like Malik Renew's chance, right? Like he had Trace Jackson Davis to play next to. He had Kel'el Ware play next to. Now it's Indiana's going to prioritize guards in the portal. From everything I'm hearing, that's who most of their visitors are right now. They have the Bradley guy just come and visit. I think the guy from George Mason, I think he's a forward. So, Indiana's interested in him, but I don't think there's any talks about visits or anything yet. But at the end of the day, like Malik Renew is going to have to anchor this front court in order for them to be able to play well next season. So, looking out next season, Frank, you said you're sad for Indiana. I don't know how sad you actually are, but that's nice of you to have that sentiment for them. Do you think it's going to be another struggling year for Indiana next year without Kel'el Ware, or do you envision some kind of bounce back year, possible tournament year for them?
Things were looking pretty grim there for a minute, especially with the McNeely decommitment, because that was kind of the bastion of hope, right? Is that, okay, well, next season is going to be different. McNeely is going to come in and make a huge difference. And then that decommitment kind of happened at the peak of the Woodson hate and whatnot. So there's a lot of negativity there, but ultimately it comes down to what can they do in the portal. And it seems like I can't get on Twitter for more than 5 minutes without seeing, they're talking to this guy or this guy's coming to visit. So there's a lot of talent coming on campus. It's just how can they all be put together? Galloway coming back is huge. Anthony Leal coming back is huge, which is not something I thought I would be saying at the beginning of the season. That's absolutely huge. And Renew coming back is huge. I think that's probably the most pivotal piece, is to have him back. But ultimately, they just got to get some shooting. I think that was the biggest thing keeping them, offensively from really moving and clicking was the shooting aspect. I know the jury's kind of still out on Mbako. Not a ton. It doesn't make sense for him to really go anywhere else, in my opinion. He's well established, but I think that ultimately it comes down to what they do in the portal. But I think with that core group of Renew, Galloway, Leal, Gabe Cupps, I think them being one more year experience, I think that they're at worst a middle of the pack Big Ten team next season. So.
Yeah, I can't see a major jump that would put them at the top of the Big Ten next year. Even if they did get McNeely, like we talked about earlier, freshmen just don't make the impact that they used to. So I have less concern about Illinois next season based on the freshman stuff, and more concern just about like year 2, year 3 going on from here. But Sonny, your thought about Indiana next year without Ware?
Well, you've been kind of hearing that their NIL has really, really stepped up this offseason, that they've kind of reached a point of frustration that they're going to buy. Like, if talent is out there to be bought, they're going to try to buy that talent. And now, having said that, they lost a guy to Xavier just earlier today. So I'm not sure, how much that's really going to be worth. But truthfully, from the few Indiana fans I do talk to, hi, Burke, they seem to just kind of be done with the whole Mike Woodson era before, unfortunately, the administration seems to be. And so I think they might be stuck with another long year, fire in Woodson maybe halfway through the year, try to have first dibs on whoever the hottest coach is next year, and see where things go from there.
Yeah, I agree. AJ Storr as well is NBA going. I put testing the NBA because, Frank, like you, I saw AJ Storr going to the NBA. I was like, I wonder where he's mocked at. He's not mocked, hardly at all. It's not, this is a situation where, somebody goes to the NBA and, they figure out what do you work on for your game. And so that's why I originally thought. I was like, well, we'll get on here and we'll talk about how AJ Storr is going to get, information that he needs to go back to school and do this, do that. And then I looked up some more information and found out that AJ Storr wrote like a huge long letter saying goodbye to the Wisconsin fans and like thanking his family and everything, and like the NBA is his dream. And although he didn't mention anything about going into the transfer portal, kind of sounded like, hey, I'm going to go test the NBA waters, and if this doesn't work out, see you, Wisconsin. I'm going somewhere else next year. I'm going to, some other school. He's only a sophomore. So it seems really, really strange to me that you would declare for the NBA draft and stick with it when you're this young if you're not really being mocked. I suppose he could do really well in testing, but at the end of the day, it just kind of seems like a weird choice. And even if he does just test the NBA waters, I don't know if he's back at Wisconsin next year. Sonny, what are your thoughts?
I think it's very little chance that he comes back to Wisconsin next year. I mean, he talked about in his press conference, the press is kind of baiting him into talking about coming back next year, and he just wouldn't take the bait. I think putting his name into the NBA draft, the plan is essentially just to kind of soften the blow for when he decides to come back. He's another guy who I've heard his name involved with Illinois as kind of like a Terrence Shannon replacement. I've heard his name go out to Kentucky just because Kentucky's got a lot of money and they're going to be very aggressive in trying to perform well in the tournament next year. It's, Calipari, as much as Calipari can be on the hot seat, he's on it now. So, yeah, and as Philip brought up, kissing the floor. He's already transferred once. Originally he was an Illinois commit. Then he went to it was St. John's, and St. John's he went over to Wisconsin. I think this is a guy who enjoyed his experience in Madison, but I think he's trying to maximize what he can get financially, and I think that's just what's most important to him right now. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in a different uniform next year.
Yeah, I mean, I would like for him to stay at Wisconsin because I do think that Greg Gard's job kind of depends on it a little bit. But at the end of the day, he's obviously a really good player, and if you see him go somewhere and do great things, you love to see that for his career. But Frank, your thoughts? I mean, Storr coming back, is he actually going to the NBA? If he does come back, is he with Wisconsin? Your thoughts, Frank?
Yeah, so just like you said, I haven't seen him mocked anywhere. I haven't seen his name on any draft boards. I haven't seen any experts projecting him to go either in the first round or the second round. So I was kind of surprised to see that he was entering the draft. I mean, he's a very good player. So again, my immediate thoughts were that he was just going to test the waters, get some feedback, and come back. But that sort of letter was really cryptic. I mean, it was weird, and I'm just now learning that he kissed the floor on senior night in the comments, so that's even weirder. So it seems like the writing may be on the wall that he's not looking to come back to Wisconsin. And he did start out at St. John's, went to Wisconsin, but at what point do you label yourself as a flight risk, so to speak, and that you're gonna throw up some red flags for potential coaches and saying like, hey, you've already been at two schools. And I'll admit, I don't fully understand the transfer rules anymore. I don't understand when you have to sit out, when you don't. At first there was you can only do it once, and now it's I don't fully understand what all's involved with that anymore. It's extremely complicated these days. But assuming he doesn't have to sit out and he's able to go somewhere and contribute immediately, if he's a guy who's just looking to get the biggest NIL check that he can, and is looking to go to a championship contending team, I think he definitely could do that. I don't see Wisconsin as being the type of program that's going to be okay with that and be willing to play ball, so to speak. So I think for more reason than what we've already talked about, there's it's pretty reasonable to believe that he's probably not going to be back at Wisconsin next season, which is a shame. It's really a big shame. He added an element to that team, or adds an element to that team. I guess he's still on the team. That no one else could really match. We did see some flashes from Blackwell, so I'm feeling good about what I've seen from him. But as Sonny talked about, the floor for Wisconsin next season is looking to be pretty low, and if you remove AJ Storr, it's pretty drastic. Losing a season as well. So that's unfortunate for the Wisconsin team if all that we're speculating is true. But I have confidence in Gard, and what they can do in the portal is ultimately gonna dictate what next season looks like for them.
And I will add one thing. When AJ Storr originally committed to the Illini out of high school, he committed to an assistant coach named Chin Coleman. Chin Coleman that offseason, him and Orlando Antigua got hired by John Calipari and are now on the Kentucky staff. So Storr decommitted once our assistant coaches left, went to St. John's. Now the guys he originally committed to when they were at Illinois are now at Kentucky, and Kentucky has a lot of money that they can spend So that's why that fit kind of makes a little sense.
I didn't know all that. That's good info to have. And as you said, there's a lot of pressure on Kentucky right now to do something in the tournament. And he, as someone who lives in the state of Kentucky, you're right. He is as on the hot seat as much as you can be for being the head coach of Kentucky. Fans are not happy. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I think he had a meeting and he is coming back, and I saw something out there about how he is declaring to do things different going forward. So I guess that means he's not planning to have a roster full of freshmen every single year, which in the current state of college basketball is probably a good idea. But yeah, that leads me to what you were thinking, Sonny, that Kentucky would seem like a kind of destination that would be pretty good for him, especially with how John Calipari is able to get guys NBA ready in his system. So it would not be unlikely. Real quick, guys, before we move on and end the show here, Frank, let's go back to you. I mean, Wisconsin next year. No O'Connor Essegian, no Tyler Wall. He's gone. If AJ Storr is gone, and obviously we can't speculate too much about Chucky Hepburn. However, there are rumblings there. But I do remember him saying something about coming back to Wisconsin. I don't remember if it was the most official thing in the world. But in that situation, Frank, do you have serious concerns about Wisconsin next year, even if they just lose Essegian, Wall, and Storr?
I do, yeah. I mean, Wall adds an element that his craftiness is hard to match. Crowell's been an efficient scorer. Not the most flashy guy, but he's solid, and really, outside of him and Blackwell, and I don't know what's going on with Chucky Hepburn, but if you can't keep those core guys, I'm concerned, honestly, just for the lack of depth. And I mean, yeah, you have some guys in Carter Gilmore and Nolan Winter who did play some this season, but looking more like role players and not necessarily huge contributors. But yeah, I think that with all this that's unfolding with AJ Storr, I'm very concerned for Wisconsin next season. Again, the transfer portal is great in that in these scenarios you can just kind of plug holes, but I think that really there's a lot of pressure on guard right now to do something big in the portal if everything that's happening with Storr is showing to be correct.
Yeah, guard needs to go out there and get somebody to make the fans happy, especially with losing some players that they were already happy with, possibly. So, Sonny, your quick outlook on Wisconsin next year if they don't have Storr, Essegian, and obviously Wall.
I mean, it's a similar storyline to what Indiana's going through, because if guard has a bad start to the year, half the fan base is already ready to move on. And, we have a new AD who obviously made a splash hire in the football department, bringing in Luke Fickell. Maybe the pressure is going to be on him to try to do the same thing with Wisconsin basketball, which, it's a shame. I think guard is a good coach. And I think a lot of teams and administrations kind of have to look back and see what happens when you get rid of what's a good coach. Like Michigan won, 3-4 games this year. The Big Ten is a really tough conference to win basketball games. And so, right now your ceiling might be limited by having guard, to being third, maybe second place in the conference, but there's not a lot of teams in the country that can win the national championship. And there's a lot of, giveaway that if you hire the wrong guy, that you're doing the same thing 4 years from now, trying to find the right guy. Whereas you have what I consider relatively high floor with guard in charge.
Yeah. Phillips is the best here. Guard, high floor, low ceiling type of coach, and that's not something that fans are normally too happy with. So they want the high ceiling and just don't get to your floor type of coach. Philip also asked Michi Johnson back to Ohio State. I have heard that, and I know that Ohio State fans are rumbling about that quite a bit. I'm not really in favor of it. I like Michi, but I'm concerned that if Michi does come back, Ohio State will lose some of their young talent that I feel like still can develop. So we'll see what goes on there. But Philip, I'm actually hoping that one doesn't happen, as opposed to the other Ohio State fans that are very much so hoping that does happen. So. All right, guys. Thanks for a great episode tonight. This was fantastic. I wish both of your teams luck in the Sweet 16, and once you win there, to the Elite Eight as well. Frank, why don't you tell people where they can find Bowler Express at?
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter at Boiler_Express. You can find us on YouTube at Boiler Express Podcast, Spotify, Boiler Express Podcast, Apple Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you can listen to a podcast. We're on platforms I've never even heard of, to be honest with you. So if there's a place you can listen to podcasts, audio, we're there, and then Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, you can find us on there as well. Thanks for having me on, JR. It was a good time.
Of course, yeah, go listen to Boiler Express. They do great stuff over there. Sonny, of course, listen to Illinicast. Tell people where they can find you at.
Yeah, basically everywhere you can find Boiler Express, you can probably find Illinicast. Subscribe to us if you get a chance. Tomorrow morning, we're going to make a nice special announcement. So we're really excited about that. But yeah, you can find us here on YouTube. That's probably the easiest way. And, good luck on Friday night, Frank.
Let's hope for 2 Big Ten wins this weekend.
Let's do it.
4 Big Ten wins this weekend. How about that?
There we go. I need that national championship pick to come true. I will go wild if that happens. All right. Hey, thanks so much, guys, for coming on and giving your thoughts. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. Please do like and subscribe and follow us wherever you find us on social media. We appreciate that. Have a good one, everybody.